Hello everyone, welcome back to MalStorm Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner. Today I'm going to be going over my top 10 games as of 2021. So first off, number 10, we have the Pathfinder adventure card game by Paizo Games. And I really enjoyed this game. It's really neat how you have your character that you can build out with different items and equipment, and then you can give them different allies and spells, and then you're going to go on adventures and go through different scenarios. And as you play the scenarios, you're going to be able to encounter more and more cards that may be able to go into your deck, or maybe obstacles you have to face. And then you're going to be rolling dice to try to acquire or defeat those cards. And then you're going to be playing over a course of a campaign where it's almost like where you're going to be getting more cards to add to your deck as the games progress. And then you're going to be able to unlock different abilities, special powers for your character as you gain experience and progress through the campaign. And so I really enjoyed the Pathfinder, all the dice chucking and clever card play. Very fun. And next up at number 9, we have Enchanters. Originally published by Gindie Games, but then republished by Mythic Games. Enchanters is a really cool game where you start out with just a simple fist of enchanting, and then you're going to be drafting cards from the center of the table, and you're going to be able to craft the ultimate magic weapon. You're always going to have one item card and one enchantment card face up, so the item you have with the game is going to change as you go on. Start out with a Fist of Enchanting. After a couple of turns, you may have a Sword of Singing. And then by the end of the game, you may end up with a Hammer of Darkness. It all depends. One of the really cool things I like about the game is that even after you've drafted additional cards to go onto the item and enchantment stack, there is still the potential for your older cards to still impact the game and impact your stats through certain abilities not actually being deactivated when you gain a new item or enchantment to the stack. I think that's really cool. So yes, by the end of the game I just don't have my sword anymore, but my sword is still making me a little bit more powerful because I had the sword at one point, and it's still giving me some benefit, even though it has been covered up since. Next up, my number 8 game for this year is going to be Puzzle Dungeon. This is a really fun game by Brian Garber. In it, you're going to be playing as a lone adventurer who's going to be going into a dungeon filled with monsters, and you're going to need to slay specific types of monsters to fulfill your victory condition and get out of the dungeon alive. So you don't actually need to defeat all of the monsters, but you need to defeat certain monsters based off of your specific character. One character you may play might have to destroy all the undead and magical creatures, whereas another character may have to destroy all the constructs and terror creatures. It all depends on your character, of course, and actually that's kind of the thing that's so great about the game. It all depends on your character. The game has tons of characters, and they all change up the way you play, and the overall game is very similar to some of the solitaire games that you play with a standard deck of 52 cards, but it takes that and adds special abilities that you gain from your heroes and monsters and everything to create a really cool experience that is really cool to play and has lots of replayability because you have tons of different characters. I believe there might be a total of like 200 characters out at this point or something like that. Something crazy. There's a lot of characters. They all have a different twist. Some of them just give you a slight bonus, like when you use 2 cards with the same value, you get to draw a card for your discard pile, but then others have very different ways of playing, completely changing the victory condition elements of the game and just flipping the game on its head. Lots of characters, wide variety, and that is Puzzle Dungeon, my number 8 game by Brian Garber. Next up for number 7, it's going to be Marvel Champions by Fantasy Flight Games, and I'll tell you now, this is not going to be the last time that Fantasy Flight will appear on this list. So, in Marvel Champions, you're going to be taking the role of your favorite superheroes from the Marvel Universe. You're going to be playing through a scenario, and the main objective is to take down a specific villain that you're playing against. And again, just like there's a lot of heroes, there's lots of villains as well, all iconic Marvel characters, such as Green Goblin, or Rhino, or Red Skull. And each villain has its own deck that they're using, own playstyle, and you're going to need to play your cards in clever ways to beat the villain. I really enjoy the dynamic between your hero and alter ego form. There are certain cards and actions you can do when you're in hero form, and then certain cards and abilities that you can do when you are in alter ego form. And also, the villains will interact with you differently based off of which form you're on, and so you're going to need to be flipping between Spider-Man and Peter Parker as you progress through the game, which is a really neat thing. And I also really enjoy how to play any of the cards in their game, you're going to need to sacrifice the ability to play other cards by actually discarding those cards. So if you have a card that costs 3 resources, to generate those resources, you need to discard 3 other cards from your hand, which creates a very fun puzzle to play through, since you may want to play multiple cards from your hand, but in order to play any one of those cards, you're going to need to discard some of the other cards that you wanted to play. I really enjoy that, and I think it's very fun. So that's my number 7, Marvel Champions. Next up, number 6 is going to be Dragonfire, and this is actually right behind me, and this is published by Catalyst Games. Dragonfire is a deck building game where you're going to have a starter deck of cards, and you're going to be playing those cards to defeat monsters. As you defeat monsters, you're going to gain gold, which you can use to purchase cards from the market that will have more powerful abilities and swords and spells and weapons that you're going to be able to use to defeat even more monsters as the game goes on. It's not like a full-on legacy game, but like Pathfinder, it does have some campaign elements that you can carry on as you play more games. If you beat a scenario, you're going to gain experience points, which you can then use to purchase different features, which are stickers that you can place on your character card to get more abilities. And then you're also going to be able to get some magic items, which are special cards that you can add to your starter deck as you progress through the game. One thing I really enjoy about Dragonfire is the Dragonfire deck, and this is a deck of cards very similar to like event cards from other games, but the really neat thing about this is that you'll resolve these Dragonfire events at the beginning of the round, and then you place it back on top of the Dragonfire deck face up. And then at the end of the round, you'll discard it into the Dragonfire discard pile. And then you'll draw a new card at the beginning of the next round. As the Dragonfire cards are added to the discard pile, the Dragonfire level will go up. And the Dragonfire level is simply equal to the amount of cards in the discard pile for the Dragonfire deck. As the game goes on and more cards are added to this discard pile and the Dragonfire level goes up, the enemies and Dragonfire cards themselves will become more powerful and more deadly. And so you really need to go quickly as you play through the game. And I think that's a really interesting way of having a timer. Not a straight-on timer. In the game, you have 10 rounds to get through the scenario, but it's a more dynamic timer where essentially you do only have a certain number of rounds, but the game isn't just over after you run out of time. It just becomes very, very difficult as you play through the game. So that's an interesting element, and I do definitely like playing Dragonfire a lot, and that's why it's my number 6 game. Next up, number 5, we have Spirit Island, and this is a game published by Greater Than Games. In Spirit Island, you are playing as the spirits of this island, different elements. You might be the spirit of the rivers, or you might be thunder, or various things. And all of these spirits have really cool names, such as Lightning Swift Strike, or Shadow's Flicker Like Flame. Each spirit is wildly asymmetric, with each spirit having different cards, with having unique cards that they're going to have and be able to play, as well as having unique rules and abilities that they're going to be able to utilize and follow. At the beginning of the game, the settlers really have the upper hand, and you're not prepared to actually take them on, but as you play through the game, you're becoming more and more powerful, and then you're going to end up being able to do really cool card plays and combos, sending tsunamis on the island, and firestorms, all in hopes of generating enough fear to make the invaders flee from the island, so you can then again have peace. I really like Spirit Island. I mentioned the asymmetric spirits, and that's really one of the coolest elements of the game, just how different each spirit is. And then as you play through the game, you're going to be drawing more power cards, which will allow you to do different actions, and these are going to be coming from a common pool of cards, and so then each spirit starts out very different from each other, but then as the game goes on even more, your spirit's going to be changing and adapting and becoming even more unique, which is just really fun. So that is my number 5 game, Spirit Island. Next up, in my number 4 spot, we have Gloomhaven, and this also includes Jaws of the Lion, and also Frosting whenever it comes out. But just the overall system of Gloomhaven I really enjoy. In this, you're going to be playing as mercenaries, each with their own sets of action cards. So each turn, you're going to be playing 2 cards from your hand, Each of these cards has 2 different special actions on them as well as just the basic actions that every card has, but you're going to be using the top action of one card and then the bottom action of the other card. And you can choose any combination as long as you use the top action of one and the bottom action of the other. Everyone's going to be playing their cards simultaneously, and then everyone's going to reveal their cards at the same time. And then you're also going to be revealing cards for all the monsters that are inhabiting the dungeon. They're going to calculate the initiative for all the cards played, determine who's going to go first, and the turn order. And then when it comes down to your turn, you actually are able to choose which action combination you like to play, which I really like, where you have a sort of programming element to the game where you're picking out the cards you want to use beforehand, but then even after you've selected those cards, as you work through the initiative order and the board state changes, you're actually able to react to that when it comes down to your turn, and by switching up which 2 actions you have to use to be able to account for the situation. Those are just a couple of things I do enjoy about the game, and that is why it is my number 4 Gloomhaven. Alright, next up in my number 3 position is going to be Battlecon. Battlecon is a card game that takes the fighting game genre and ports it into a board game. So this is very close to a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat in board game form. Each player is going to have a character with a unique set of cards and abilities, and you're going to be playing and you're going to be battling each other to see who comes out on top. And on your turn, you're going to be playing 2 cards face down simultaneously. One is going to be a base, which is your basic action, and then the other one is going to be a style, which is going to change how your basic action works. And each player is going to play those, and together those are going to create a attack pair. And so after you revealed your cards, you're going to calculate the priority. You're going to see who goes first, who goes second. Then you'll calculate range and see if you can hit your opponent. If you can hit your opponent and do enough damage to him, you might stun him, and then he won't be able to perform his attack. But he also may not be stunned, and then he'll be able to hit you back, which isn't very good. The game all comes down to a sort of rock, paper, scissors type game where certain cards are good at beating other cards, and it's all about predicting what your opponent is about to do so you can counter it and get a hit on them without them actually being able to do much damage to you. What makes it really cool is all of the adjustments to the basic rock, paper, scissors dynamic of the game with all the character-specific abilities and cards. You might have one character who is able to infuse their attacks with different elemental abilities. Or you might have a character who has a bunch of zombies on the field trying to help you out. Or you can have a pet panda who's walking around doing various attacks and such. Lots of different characters in the game, each with their own unique way of helping you out, and it's all about mastering your abilities and your cards, and then predicting what your opponent is going to do, so that you're able to counter them. Some of the most fun I've had in Battlecon is when I'm able to predict what my opponent is going to do, and then I can counter his attack and stun him, and then he's not able to hit me, or I could just take a step back, he swings and misses, and then I shoot him with a fireball. Lots of different tactics in the game, but I really enjoy the whole rock, paper, scissors-ish type gameplay. So that is why Battlecon is my number 3 game for the list here. And now moving on to number 2, it is going to be Marvel Legendary. Marvel Legendary is a game published by Upper Deck and designed by Devlin Lowe, and it is a deck building game where you start out with a deck of 12 cards that are all very bad, and you're going to be using those cards to generate 2 different resources. You have Recruit and Attack. Your attack is going to allow you to defeat different villains in the city, and then eventually when you get enough attack, you're going to be able to defeat the Mastermind, and you need to hit him 4 times in order to defeat him, and then the players will win the game after you've done that. The Recruit, on the other hand, allows you to purchase cards from the center row to add into your deck. And they're going to go in your discard pile, and then after you run out of cards in your draw deck, you're going to shuffle up your discard pile to form a new deck. And now, all the cards you purchased are in your new deck. And so now you have Hulk helping you out, and Captain America commanding your shield troops so that they do more damage. And it's all just to get more resources, to purchase better cards, to generate more resources, to be able to take down the villains and masterminds in the game before the mastermind accomplishes his villainous scheme. The whole thing is very modular. You can use any combination of heroes you want with any combination of villains and mastermind and the scheme twist, and you can just use really whatever you want to create unique villain decks and hero decks to be able to use, and then you really have a very different experience each time because of all the combinations. And Legendary has had a lot of expansions, so there's lots of additional content for the game that you can add to your collection if you'd like to do so, and then you get even more replayability out of it. Lots of heroes and villains and everything out there. So I really enjoy Marvel Legendary, and it is my number 2 game for this year. And I really enjoy Marvel Legendary, so that is why it's my number 2 game for this year. And it's also the game that really got me into solo gaming as a hobby, which I'm also very grateful for. Alright, next up in my number 1 place. So now, last but not least, my number 1 game for the year. And this is actually also the first solo game that I played with official solo rules. This is going to be the Lord of the Rings LCG by Fantasy Flight Games. In this game, you're going to be building a fellowship of heroes from across Middle-earth, and you're going to be building a deck around those heroes filled with various allies and attachments, different equipment pieces, and events to go into your deck, and then you're going to go up against a quest. And these quests are very varied and have all sorts of different enemies you're going to need to fight and different victory conditions. You might be exploring some mountains, you might be fighting a Balrog or defending a citadel. Lots of different things, and each scenario is so different from each other, and they really play with a lot of interesting elements. As you play through the scenarios, you're going to experience a lot of very different scenarios. These scenarios feel very different from each other, and they have a lot, and there's a lot of game space, there's a lot of design space to work with in the Lord of the Rings game LCG, and so you're able to have lots of very varied scenarios that are very fun to play through. The game is very difficult, and this is actually one thing I really like about the game, is that it is so difficult. It really involves building a deck, playing against the scenario, finding out your deck doesn't work very well, tweaking your deck to fit the scenario, and trying it again. Oh, you also failed that time? Oh well, now you go back to the drawing board, go back to your collection of cards, fix your deck some more, and then you go back to the scenario, and now you've beaten it. And that's a very satisfying gameplay loop. You really need to master each scenario in it. I really enjoy the feeling of mastering a scenario, building the perfect deck to beat the scenario, and then moving on to the next one. It's a completely different experience and needs a completely different set of tools, which is very fun for me. And those are just a couple of the reasons why the Lord of the Rings LCG is my favorite game as of 2021. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope some of these games here sound interesting to you. If you do want to check some of them out, I've done reviews for a lot of the games on this list, and if there's a game that I haven't reviewed yet, I may end up doing a review for it at some point in the future. If you did enjoy this video and you found it helpful, please like it. Consider subscribing to MalStorm Gaming to see more content just like this, and until next time, happy gaming!